My 37F husband, 39M, went to a work dinner with a woman and was gone 5 hours, wasn't where he said he'd be, and wouldn't respond to my calls and texts. I kicked him out and he says I'm overreacting. Can anyone help me make sense of what happened here? My husband of 6 years works in a field where sales reps are constantly vying to get him to use their products. One of the ways they do this is by putting on dinners at upscale restaurants, think expensive steakhouses, and inviting groups to come listen to a presentation about the product in exchange for a free steak dinner. So far this year, my husband has attended upwards of 40 of these dinners. I find this a little excessive, especially considering we have a 3-year-old and a 5-month-old at home, and I rarely get a reciprocal night out. For context, we've been out together without the kid 4 times in the past year. I have asked him to cut back on these dinners, but he refuses, saying he hopes to leverage these relationships into brand-sponsored speaking opportunities that could become a temporary source of secondary income. To his credit, this has happened before, and he made some good money before his stint as a speaker ended. Anytime I complain about the number of dinners he attends, he accuses me of not caring about our financial situation, or even outright trying to sabotage it. It is my understanding that he attends far more of these dinners than most people in his field. Okay, on to the dinner in question. Last week, he forwarded me a screenshot of a text from a sales rep who said she would be in town for 2 nights and wanted to have dinner with just him while she was there. This is fairly unusual, as most dinners are group affairs with friends and colleagues. On one other occasion, he has met with a sales rep one-on-one, but it was an older man. On this occasion, it was an attractive woman around our age. I looked her up on the socials. They agreed to meet on Monday at 6:30 at a nice tapas restaurant in an expensive part of town because, according to my husband, it was close to her hotel. Made sense, though I raised an eyebrow at his phrasing. He got annoyed, but I pointed out that it was a dumb thing to say to your wife when you're meeting a woman for dinner at a nice restaurant. He left the house at 6:04. For context, I am extremely sleep-deprived. I'm up with the new baby several times a night, and my husband has refused to participate in night feedings. So, by 9 o'clock, I was tired and really wanted to sleep, but the baby was colicky and crying, and it was keeping my toddler awake. I texted my husband to find out when he thought he'd be home so I could have a sense how long it'd be before I could sleep. In the text, I said it was NBD, just give me a ballpark idea of when you'll be home. He didn't respond. He wears an Apple Watch and is constantly responding to texts on his phone, so it was annoying to me that he couldn't give me an ETA after 3 hours at dinner. I called him at 9:15 and he sent me straight to voicemail. I called again at 9:30 with the same result. At this point, I texted and told him I was calling the restaurant. When I did, the host told me there was no one in the restaurant, and he could confidently say that no one matching my husband's description had been into the restaurant at all that night. I texted that I was calling his parents to see if they had heard from him. They hadn't. Finally, at almost 10 o'clock, I texted and told him not to come home. 15 minutes after my last text, he sent me an automated text from his GPS app telling me he'd be home by 10:20 p.m. I texted again and told him to go to his parents' house. He showed up anyway and I wouldn't let him in. He didn't have keys. He said I was acting crazy. He said the tapas restaurant was more like a sports bar, so they went to a nicer place across the street. He said his phone was in his pocket on silent, except he had to have declined the calls in order to send me straight to voicemail. He said he was trying to generate revenue for our family. He said my self-esteem was not his problem. He said my behavior had better be a symptom of PMDD. He said I was creating events in my mind. Long story short, I didn't let him in. He slept at his parents and came over to the house in the morning to get his stuff. He's there again tonight, after going to yet another dinner, and likely will be for the foreseeable future. I think his behavior was shady and disrespectful to me, but he thinks I've blown the whole thing out of proportion. I'm so tired that I can't make sense of it, and I need to ask Reddit if I'm justified in my anger, or if he's right and I'm blowing this out of proportion. What do you think? Thanks in advance. TLDR. My husband went to a work dinner with a woman, was gone for 5 hours, wasn't where he said he'd be, and wouldn't respond to my calls and texts. Now he's calling me crazy and paranoid.